So concurrent with the IPO, and here are a couple examples of PowerPoint presentation slides that we've used with clients that we think reflect this right information rapidly transferred for high recall. So on this example, you can see from ComDev, we've talked about moving up the value chains. They have a traditional strength today, and there's a current opportunity facing with them that appears to give them higher margin. Next slide. In this example, we've used fonts and images to try and rapidly transfer some information. In terms of the growth of this company, they were moving from an international-based sales at current to very much more focused on China in the future. I think this slide rapidly transfers that information. Next slide.
Good. So as Ross mentioned, here to talk more about the corporate video. So don't forget to consider a corporate video. The corporate video is an excellent way to expose new investors to the day-to-day business of your company. It's an opportunity to powerfully tell your story, use music and motion graphics to create emotion and engage your audience. It's an excellent introduction to your presentation. Not only does it set the stage for the presentation to come, but it helps to quiet and focus the room. It gets potential investors to put down their BlackBerries and listen to you. So on the prospectus and gatefold, as Ross said, it's an old joke that no one reads the prospectus. But the truth is, everyone reads the gatefold. Why not? It's shiny, colorful, and fun to read. So a few tips here. Ensure that it contains the key messages. Keep it simple. Keep the word count low. Use graphics to quickly tell your story. Make the investor want to keep reading the prospectus. It's like a first date. The goal of the gatefold is to get a second date with the prospectus.
Now, as we mentioned, one of the most important channels of communication in the IPO is you. To the potential investors you meet on your roadshow, you are your company, and they will base their decision on how well you present. In this sense, skill at presenting is equated to your skill as a manager, which may not be fair, but unfortunately you, your presentation, and the prospectus are all the prospective investor has to work with. This makes it crucial that you present to the best of your abilities and that you are completely familiar with your presentation, so you can move through it quickly or add detail or present it in a non-linear fashion depending on the needs of the audience. It's also important that you answer questions well, another demonstration of your skill and knowledge. You can only achieve this level of proficiency necessary by building in enough time when creating the presentation that allows you enough time to practice. Too often, presenters tweak the bullets in their PowerPoint to the last minute, but come off as amateurs because they can't speak to their slides. We also believe it's important that you work with a coach to advance your skills. No matter your talent or experience, it's beneficial to work with a coach. It's true for professional athletes as well as presenters. A coach can give you an honest assessment of your performance and suggest ways to improve or enhance your presentation. Tools that we use to help speakers include video analysis, where we video record the presentation so you can view your own performance and self-evaluate. We also employ role-playing, where we practice in the different meeting scenarios to give you a sense of what to expect. This includes question-and-answer sessions where you practice giving strong, consistent answers. And the same way that Sidney Crosby practices his shot over and over, we recommend you practice your presentation over and over until it's completely embedded. You want to take it to the point that giving your presentation is muscle memory, like a slap shot or a golf swing. This is vitally important because you will make many, many presentations during the course of a roadshow, as many as 8 per day. You need your last presentation made late Friday afternoon to be as strong and engaging as your first one when you were fresh on Monday morning. Now, here are a couple of the reasons you need to work so hard rehearsing. Portfolio managers. There is a significant competition for their attention. You may see an example of this on your roadshow if one of you stops in Boston to meet Fidelity Investments, who participate in many IPOs. In the waiting area, you're likely to see several other roadshow teams huddled with their laptops and color books waiting for their meeting with the portfolio manager. PMs see many presentations and have heard it all. Some might even be called cynical, and you have to make a positive impression to convince them to participate in your offering. Another challenge is that this is a one-shot deal. They can make a significant investment, but you will have only one meeting with them to convince them to invest. There are other distinct audiences that you will encounter on your roadshow. By understanding their information needs, you can present to them better. Sell-side analysts, initially from your underwriters, will meet with you with the possibility of launching coverage. They require detailed knowledge of your company, such as your sales cycle, unique market positioning, and growth strategy. They're likely quite familiar with your industry and need to create financial models and compare you to other public companies in your space. Their reports can have a significant influence on your stock performance, so it's important you supply sufficient information and correct any misconceptions they may have. Institutional investors, which includes portfolio managers, are directly investing in your offering and also require detailed information so they understand your business. In addition, they will need to connect to you and your team to provide them with the assurance that you have the skills to execute on your growth plan and make them money. Investment advisors will be investing their clients' money in your offering and will be particularly interested in your investment highlights as well as your growth strategy, so they can pass these on. You want them to become your advocate. You are most likely to meet advisors in a group meeting, either at their offices or in hotel meeting rooms. Here, you must project your personality into the meeting to get and keep their attention. At all times, it's good practice to review the meetings with your underwriters, who are familiar with the accounts and can brief you on their specific needs. To conclude, presenting is vital, and don't treat it lightly. The skills you develop during the roadshow will serve you well throughout your entire public company career. Now earlier, Ross introduced the metaphor of a house. In IPOs, as in house sales, the most important event is the closing. The process we've described here today should get you to the close. In IPOs, however, the close is just the beginning of your transformation. Ross will speak to you about what's next.
So this is a bit of a fun slide. Congratulations, you're public. I mean, the journey that you take to get to this IPO is incredible. And you should take a lot of pride in the fact that you have successfully been able to close, as Craig says. You know, what we find time and time again, though, is that once you've gone through this process, it's oftentimes a management team that says, okay, now it's time to get back to business, right? I've dealt with all this roadshow marketing for the last 4 weeks, the prospectus drafting before that, the forming the syndicate before that. You know, it's time to get back to my base business and grow that. But what's great about being a public company is that while there's a tremendous number of new opportunities, unfortunately there's also a tremendous number of new responsibilities. And these responsibilities can take various forms, you know, from more road shows, going out and marketing, to media scrutiny now that you're a public company. You know, obviously the one that sticks out most in some people's minds is quarterly reporting. You know, attending conferences, dealing with conference calls, dealing with retail shareholders. You know, you're now dealing with a new level of owners who, you know, believe rightly or wrongly that they should have some say in the direction of the company. And you have to respond to them in a professional and prudent fashion. So, you know, those are some of the issues that you're going to be dealing with. So what we suggest is, you know, while you're in that pre-IPO stage, think about putting together the solid IR infrastructure before the IPO so you have those capabilities in place that you can launch strongly once you close. And what we think is a really critical factor here is that you not launch into a vacuum. You want to have, you know, a certain amount of material, you know, tangible news flow coming out of your IPO, you know, and you want to have the IR components built in around it so that you can gain that liquidity and support in the market. So some things to consider, you know, in this regard: disclosure policy, right? What type of disclosure policy do you have now? You know, do you have one? Siri has a great base model to work off. You know, you'll probably want to customize it to your company's needs. Second, you know, from the management and general staff education perspective, you know, you need to train them on what it means to be a public company. You know, what restrictions are there surrounding disclosure. You know, you can no longer talk to your family and friends about what's going on internally if those family and friends are able to trade in the open market. You know, at this stage of the game, you're going to want to light up, you know, a more robust side of your website in terms of the investor relations component. You know, Emily spoke to you about websites earlier on today. You know, you probably want a fairly toned down version in terms of the investor relations component during the IPO, but once you've got that ticker up, you want to have a more robust section. Also at this stage, you can do an audit of your peer set. What are their disclosure practices? Do you want to borrow from them? Can you customize some of the things they do to your benefit? You know, our experience is that a company that goes public and is immediately active in following best practices generates additional support in the market, and that's what we want. So you want to have a plan in place for that first 3 to 6 months of what your IR program is going to look like. That plan should include a calendar of activities, your key reporting dates, what sector-based or financial-based conferences you might want to attend, and a target list of new analysts outside your syndicate and potential media outlets. You'll also want to start compiling your contact database for news dissemination. So these are just some of the things that you're thinking about in terms of post-IPO. You know, another big issue that comes up is guidance practices. You know, you're a public company. Are you going to give guidance in your first reporting period? You know, providing guidance isn't a black and white decision. You know, there are lots of great info there from Neary and Siri, but you know, whether you want to take a look at whether your peer companies are providing guidance, how they've done in providing that before you jump in that first reporting period and provide it your own. So as Craig mentioned, it's not just a destination, it's a journey. So we like to think of it in those 3 stages that he set up: pre-IPO, IPO, and post-IPO. You want to make sure that in the pre-phase you get that strong positioning, your core messages in place. During the IPO, you want to make sure that you go out there with solid presentation materials and great delivery, because you're only going to get one chance to meet a bunch of these people that have the potential to write you a check. And then post-IPO, you want to make sure that you hit the ground running, that you have a plan in place and you have the infrastructure ready so that you don't launch into a vacuum. You know, and this all leads us to our final thought for the day, which is, you know, an IPO is a high-stakes game. There's a big payoff, right? There's a payoff in terms of, you know, new investors, new capital, liquidity for existing investors, right? But there's also a great deal of risk, and no one can ever check every box in a checklist of how you're going to successfully IPO. But before you enter one, you want to make sure that you're aware of what those risks are, what you can be doing in that pre-IPO stage so that you set yourself up for a successful close, as Craig mentioned. And you want to make sure you check off as many of those boxes as possible. So that's where we'll leave it today. We'll take a few questions from the audience. Thanks.